Howdy, folks. I'm Caleb, and welcome to Influmensirs, the podcast where we explore influential men and their influence on men and the broader conversation around masculinity as a whole. Today, we will be discussing LeBron James, one of, key phrase, the greatest basketball players of all time. With me, as usual, are my fellow Influmensirs, Seth Gerdine.
Yes, hey guys. So I am a basketball coach, college basketball coach for 14 years now. Of the 14 years, 8 championships and 7 national tournament appearances. So thank you for having me on, Caleb.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then Frank Gerdine III.
Yes, I am currently running for Chino Valley Unified School District as a board member, getting my feet wet in politics, which is completely something I didn't think I would be doing. But my emphasis and my expertise is that I studied sport and exercise psychology in grad school, where I've had really good success. So hopefully I can bring some sort of insight in the psychology department here.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I got some fancy gentlemen on with me today, so it seems. But yeah, like I said, my name is Caleb Keller, and I am a therapist working with trauma, neurodivergence, and men's issues. So that's what brings me to this conversation. But yeah, so what I tend to do here is give you a little bio of the person that we have in mind, but many of you already know. I don't need to go on and on with this guy. So, yes, LeBron James is an NBA superstar, currently playing for the Los Angeles Lakers, and previously played with the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Miami Heat. Dubbed the moniker King James, he is widely considered one of the greatest players of all time, and, in fact, the league's all-time leading scorer. 4 championships, 4 MVPs, multiple gold medals, and 1 bronze. Numerous other honors while making a record number of All-Star and All-NBA appearances. He's the oldest active player, holds multiple longevity records, all of the things. You guys already know. So, yeah, but what we tend to do with Influmensirs to start is something real simple and basic, which is quite simply, what do we think about this fellow in question? So let's start with Frank.
I personally I don't think he's the greatest of all time. However, I think the conversation needs to change, right? Like, I think he has brought a little nuance to that conversation. I also think he was always behind the 8 ball. And I think it was because I am so glad that social media wasn't around like when I was in high school in the capacity that it is now. Because when he was graduating, he was on, in Sports Illustrated, ESPN magazine. He was everywhere as a high school player, right? Like, he was already deemed to be the greatest of all time before he even stepped foot on an NBA court. And people have held him to that imaginary standard since he got into the NBA. And he has handled it with class. This guy has achieved almost everything you can achieve in the NBA. Like, he has met most of, if not all, the expectations people had for him. And he's done it without going insane, so the fact that this kid at 18 years old from Akron can elevate to the same conversation as Michael Jordan, I think is an accomplishment.
100%. What you got, Seth?
So I look at LeBron James as, 2 different people. Obviously, we're going to touch on the second part. But what makes it so interesting is the athlete part. And I would agree with my brother in saying that he's not the greatest. And we could go on, a complete tangent on why that is. But can you put him on the Mount Rushmore of basketball? Absolutely. And I think when I, talk about LeBron James, especially to, younger generations, it's not just about the basketball side of it. And that part I appreciate. So, and what I mean by that is LeBron James brought something to the game of basketball that not a lot of people had brought beforehand. And you touched on it, where it was since, he was in high school, all this hype was coming at him. And he was able to capitalize on that hype. I think also having mentors such as Kobe Bryant, such as Magic Johnson, and he mentions that in his show, the barbershop, right? Or the shop. He mentions it in the shop, and where he talks about where he had mentors, and he was able to capitalize on the business aspect from what these people learned, and he was able to do that at a young age. So I think that really helped him out, and him being so expressive about it, whereas Kobe and Magic might not have been as expressive, or at the very least, they didn't have the kind of platform that LeBron James had in the very beginning. And that got people to start considering, younger generations to start considering, hey, what am I or who am I comparatively to a business? And I also enjoy LeBron James as a human being because, and we'll touch on this too, is the way that he handled his personal affairs. And that is an example for the younger generation. So I really have a lot of good things to say about him, with the exception of, I do think that there are people that are better than him or greater than him in the game of basketball. But, I think you would be hard pressed to find somebody who has something bad to say about LeBron James personally.
Indeed, indeed. I think for the Mount Rushmore of it all, shameless plug for one of our first episodes. We did an episode on what we all consider to be the true GOAT, Mr. Michael Jordan. But what I will say is that the sort of to Frank's point earlier, the nuance of the conversation, I don't think the gap is that large between Mr. Jordan and Mr. James. I think that it is very, very narrow. If MJ's a 99, then LeBron's like a 97. Something like that. It's very, very close. But yeah, I think that what I appreciate most about LeBron is sort of the way in which this guy handled insane media press from the time, and Frank mentioned this, from the time he was 16, dubbed the chosen one while he is a sophomore or junior in high school. I'm not quite sure the year he was in, but goodness gracious, I don't know what I would have done if I would have been in a scenario where I was told that you're going to be the greatest player of all time, and I have 9 more years before my brain is fully developed. So, to just consider that with all that happened, right? And not, he hasn't done everything perfectly, right? But I think that's even part of the appeal or part of the legacy that I enjoy, right? That there's been no major problems, major controversies, right? He's been a family man through and through, which this whole spiel, right? This whole channel is dedicated to what healthy masculinity looks like, and dedication to family. It's harder to get healthier in your masculinity than that quality. So that I can't more highly tout, but yeah, and even just the way that I think he gave a lot of players more agency and autonomy. Obviously, we'll get to it, the decision. I'm sure we will discuss it, in more detail with time. But that, along with other things, just, again, literally deciding for himself and his family, and kind of just making an influence for the remainder of players that you are what people see. We don't really care about owners per se. We don't really care about anything else other than the actual talent, the actual guys that put on the uniform. So the way in which he's advocated in that realm. Some folks disagree. Some folks think it's too much entitlement. But again, we will get to it. We will get to it. We will talk about it. But yeah. So next up on our docket of what we will ask is, and we've already been touching on it somewhat, but what do we think LeBron is saying about masculinity or being a man? Whether directly or indirectly, through his life, through what happens on the court, through what happens off the court, all things in between. What does he seem to represent as far as it comes to masculinity?
Okay, so I'll touch on that a little bit, and then I'll let the sports psychologist talk. So, um, but so again, because I have such a close relationship in athletics right now, and I'm in that realm. Um, I there's not a lot of negative things I could say about LeBron James and his reflection of what masculinity is. Right, I think he's what I would call a modern alpha, and I do the air quotes. Because as we know, alphas don't really exist, but in the sense, in the social construct that we understand it, right? Um, which is, you know, he makes people feel comfortable around him. And so one of the things I wanted to touch on was his essentially his two podcasts. One of them was Mind the Game, and the one that I really liked was The Shop, right? And I know that wasn't a podcast; it was more like an HBO episode. But in The Shop, he's having conversations with other athletes, and those conversations are not just about athletics. Whereas Mind the Game is a lot more focused on athletics. Um, and so what he's talking about of him growing into his role in a few of these episodes is as a young man, he didn't have a whole lot of mentors on his team. His team did not like him. Okay. They felt that he was taking away the shine from them. And in a sense, I kind of see it because in the NBA, it's a business. So when you have somebody who's young, ambitious, and very talented, that allows your worth to go down, right? Because there's a salary cap. Um, but at the same time, you look at players that did, put them under their wings, like Kobe Bryant, for example. Um, these are guys who weren't intimidated. And we talked a little bit about it before with that, mama mentality or Michael Jordan. He wasn't intimidated probably because Kobe saw it as a challenge, and then he also saw it as, hey, if I can help somebody, I'm going to do it. And LeBron James took those lessons and he started to pass those down. He started to talk to Alonzo Balls. And I'll never forget this episode. Lonzo Ball was still with Big Baller Brand at the time. And no shade, I'm not throwing anything on it, but it was one of those things where they started a company and not everything was thought through. Not they still had some things that they needed to fix. And LeBron James gave Lonzo some very good advice. And it was just, hey, you're making the decisions for your future. And these are going to be things that you're going to have to live with, period. And he was, alluding to, hey, let me give you some advice off camera, right? Of what to do, how to handle it. And shortly afterwards, Lonzo dropped Big Baller Brand. He ended up getting signed by a major shoe deal. And, his career kind of took off. If it wasn't for the injury, I think he'd be a lot better for it, right? Indirectly, and we'll touch a little bit more on this later, you see how he actually treats people around him, right? He confronted Stephen A. Smith when Stephen A. Smith was talking ill about his son, right? And those kinds of confrontations aren't something that LeBron James shies away from. So I think when people see that, they go, oh, it is okay as a man, right, to not lose your cool. You don't see LeBron James lose his cool too often outside the court. But when you do lose your cool, make sure that it's worth something. And for LeBron James, that worth something was his son, and he was going to stand up for his son. And I think things like that are the indirect, where you could see, and then directly, obviously, him giving that advice and, allowing individuals to grow within themselves, I think is more of a direct impact that he does in the game of basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he has this keen awareness of the lights being on. They've been on, like we were kind of talking about before. I mean, was it 16 or earlier than that? I mean, probably when he was on the AAU circuit. It was starting when he was like 12, 13. I could be wrong. I've been reading up, but it was really, really early, right? And
Well,
that,
this is funny. I'll never forget this. Um, I was listening. This is ESPN radio back in LA, and I think I was in the 8th grade at this point. And people were already doing evaluations on freshmen in high school, and in those names was LeBron James. So he's kind of touched on it since his freshman year in high school, and I'll always remember that name, for that.
yeah. So not 16 then. Yeah, 14 or 15. So again, just nuts that you always know that the lights are on. One thing that I like to do on the show, just because I'm a personality typing nerd, give a little throw out. But I think it serves as a good contrast to kind of see the difference between himself and who he's often compared to, MJ, but also Kobe. So we had mentioned in the MJ podcast that the system that I really like to use is called the Enneagram, and it puts people into 9 different categories. There's a lot more that goes into it, a lot more nuance, but bare bones, 9 different types or 9 archetypes. And so the one that we talked about with MJ was called the Challenger, and so it's this mentality of, I'm going to directly have conflict or competition with you, right? And we kind of saw how that panned out in a lot of MJ's life. But to compare it with this fellow here, I think LeBron fits into what's called type 3, which is the achiever. So little snapshot of what that looks like per what I've read on it and what I know. So threes work hard to look flawless in the eyes of others, oriented to competing to win and attaining the material and status symbols of success. They focus on getting things done and always having the right image for every social context. The most aggressive, competitive, well-known three, they enjoy being on stage and know how to climb the social ladder. Right? So what I like about that is any good personality system, it shows you you're good, bad, and you're ugly, right? So you can see a little bit of what I'd argue is the cost that came with him knowing the lights were on. So that idea of being an achiever, right? One of the biggest things that is emphasized is you have to be image conscious. You have to be at a really early age, understanding that everybody is watching. So one thing that from his book that I've been listening to the audiobook, he was talking to, I think he was probably either early high school or late middle school, I forget. But he was talking to his coach, Drew Joyce, which he has nothing but high praise to say about that guy. Um, but they were sort of talking about how Coach Joyce said, "Hey, I think you can drive by anybody, right? Like anyone that's in front of you, they're not going to be in front of you for very long. You can get by them, no problem, right? You're bigger, you're faster, all the things." But at the same time, he was like, I'm getting a little worried that your teammates are going to get a little frustrated if you get 60 points, shooting 80 or 90%, because you're just getting by everybody because you're just more athletic. So he said, I think at the end of the day, if you pass the ball more, everyone will want to play with you. And then in the book, it pauses, and the narrator says, all LeBron heard was, everyone will want to play with you. So it's this idea of, with that image consciousness, what can happen or what can be a struggle for type threes. And based on what I've read and understood from LeBron, I think this is true. You still, even though the lights are on with you, you want to be connected well with those around you, right? You want the love, so to speak. So what better way to find love on the basketball court than to be an incredible passer? So again, this is just, I know I'm a personality nerd and I'm just, dorking out about it, but I just feel like it really illuminates the difference between those two and how their internal wiring makes for a different player. But yeah, what you got, Frank?
He doesn't show. I mean, we're all flawed, right? I'm not saying he's perfect, but he doesn't show any of the stereotypical, like, toxic masculinity traits that we would typically find with someone who doesn't have a father figure in their life, right? Like, he wasn't shown the example, right? And he advocates for his sons, in a positive way, right? Like, he didn't showboat them. The only thing that I had disagreed with was the confrontation with Stephen A. Smith with his son, because at that point his son was an adult, and I was like, "You're being a dad," which was totally fine. You gotta have a dad moment. Like, it's cool. But it's like, let your boy, stand on his own 2 feet at this point. Like, you've supported him, you protected him. That's great. Um, I think LeBron James has exhibited very, very positive traits his entire life, which is quite the feat, and in my opinion, the greatest feat he has achieved. Not his accolades, his scoring titles, his MVPs, his championships, since a teenager, even maybe a preteen. Whereas, again, social media wasn't as prevalent as it is now. I heard about him when I was, growing up, like, because he was that big. And so him the outlook on life, I would also commend them in the same way. You know, a lot of the times we see people blow through money, you know, we see them treat women terribly, we see them treat people around them terribly, and he has done the exact opposite. As you said, Caleb, and as you said, Seth, he treats people around him fair. No one's ever said a bad thing about LeBron that I know of. I'm sure someone's gonna have something bad to say, right? Like, no, you can't get along with everybody, but for the most part, everyone says something positive about him. You know, he has a healthy relationship with his wife and his family. He has built an empire where he is now, I believe, a billionaire with his investments, and he has never actually, like, as far as I know, like, you know, he never had any financial like education growing up. You know, this is stuff he all absorbed and understood that there was a life after basketball, and he has created something way bigger than he is. Sorry if I rambled. No, it's The great. guy is the greatest on that side of the ball, right? Like I think he is the greatest. Between him and Magic Johnson, I don't know who's better. Um, but the guy is the greatest. Even though I wouldn't draft him first in an all time draft.
Yeah, I think that one thing I kind of noted was sort of the hype that he came in with, right? Which, again, we're just gonna constantly compare him because this always ends up happening, right? Comparing him to MJ. The hype was not at that same level, right? When they're coming up, right? And there's reasons for that. We've been talking about the social media of it all. So if MJ had social media, yeah, maybe it would have been different. Who knows? Who knows? But regardless, for their own psychology, right? Like LeBron's hype was higher earlier, and then I would argue at the same time his like the developmental maturity in the adverse circumstances that he was going through were more challenging, right? Like more difficult. Not to say that, MJ's growing up, like we talked about before, he was growing up in the civil rights era in the South. He does not talk about that too much, but I'm assuming that was a little bit hard. But regardless of what we know of LeBron's story, right? Going through so much, like not quite having the stable father figure, kind of moving he moved quite a bit. I think he had said it was like 4 or 5 times within 1 or 2 years, in elementary school age, which is just insane, insane. Um, but yeah, I mean, the one thing I was gonna say is we're glowing thus far, right? We're glazing off the court, so to speak. We might nitpick on the court. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is that for all this, seemingly impeccability as far as understanding, the lights are always on, how to be a good man, how to be a good father, how to be a good husband, all those sorts of things. And yet somehow controversy. I'd be curious, what do you guys think about sort of the everything that surrounded him, whether it was the decision or, the micro what's the word I'm looking for? Not micromanaging. The
Microaggressions.
yeah, I mean, the microaggressions for sure, but in addition, the overanalyzing of every little thing that he has done, right? To the
Gotcha.
point of, um, you know, when he has been frustrated, let's say with the front office, the GM hasn't like panned out the way that he wanted to, and then he'll say certain things about it, right? Just the insane nitpicking that comes with him just being a frustrated human being, wishing that the team was better or whatever it was. I just want to throw that out to you guys. What do you think that's about, as far as why would it pile on with this guy? If single parent household, always knew the lights were on, no major controversies, pretty much an upstanding citizen. So what's going on with that?
I will get slightly political on this one, because you see it in politics, right? When I think this is the nature of media. When you don't have a story, you have to create one, right? So, and I'll never forget with Obama's tan suit, right? And again, not to get too political, but whether you agreed with his policies or not too many people are really going to say anything about this man's character, right? And the same thing with LeBron, right? They had to make a tan suit controversy with LeBron, and that's the only way they could do it. I think the only knock that I would give him is the decision, and how he did it. But that's aesthetics because all the money that he made during the decision process ended up going to Boys and Girls Club anyways, right? So there was still some positive behind it. And that was overshadowed by what people perceived as ego. And to me, I'm looking at it as that's a young 20 something year old kid, right? That probably could have made a better decision and just didn't. And, if that's going to be his only mistake, I'm okay with that. Um, And meanwhile, people are trying to find things. They're trying to find things with LeBron James to make a story out of, and they're just not going to find it. So they're going to make something up, right? As far as the GM goes, I think as he got older, this is where wish he would have figured out when he was younger, have less hand in the pot, and maybe that's a byproduct of being in Cleveland because Cleveland was notoriously horrible. But when he didn't have his hand in the pot, say in Miami, right, you got Ray Allen and you're able to get past that hump to get the 2 championships. Now that he's older, he's Los Angeles Laker, Genie Bus, the Bus family is now out. The new ownership is in there and told LeBron, "Hey, keep your hands to yourself." And I think in the month of March they lost 2 games. He figured out, "Hey, I'm no longer the number 1 guy. I got to be second or third in the offense or defense." And now there's memes of him diving on the floor, giving 100% in other areas that he otherwise wouldn't have been. And people are talking about the Lakers now being a possible contender. Um, so, if he would have figured that out earlier on some of these other franchises, I think he might have more rings. He was that good. But if that's the controversy, then there's not much of a controversy.
Okay, personally, I think when it comes to the Laker, I know it's a little bit off topic. When it comes to them potentially being a championship contender, I know a lot of people are not giving them that. However, I think LeBron can elevate his game and causes matchup problems wherever they go. And so between him and Luka Doncic, I believe that's going to be a matchup issue. And I think the only people that can match up with them very well is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Go, whatever, coach. Anyways, I totally agree with the putting his hand in the pot. I mean, you saw that a lot, like right, like every time he leaves Cleveland, their team looks better, and all you got to do is put him in there, and they win a championship, right? Like they got Kyrie Irving and I believe Kevin Love before he came back, right? Dwayne Wade was already established over there in Miami. The Lakers had some assets before LeBron James got there, and Brandon Ingram, like all these guys, all stars in their own right, right? And this was a team that they were surrounding him with, and when he got his hand in the pot, they're all gone, right? Like if you look at just even 3 of these guys still remaining on the team, you're looking at an Oklahoma City esque basketball team. But he wanted to win now. And in his defense, he won during COVID. And I believe that was simply because he was a veteran. What you had on the Lakers were a bunch of veterans. And I think that was probably the hardest championship to win because you were away from your families, you were away from society, you had to lock in. And the only people that could lock in were veterans. Um, Repeat your question for me because I feel like I was like I'm off topic here, but like yeah, repeat your question about like
Yeah, essentially just the like Seth kind of I threw the softball and he hit it. He hit it pretty far. Just essentially like simply put, it seems like an athlete of color. Oh well, just any famous person of color. All of a sudden, you need to be impeccable. All of a sudden, you need to do everything right. You have to be, without any fault, any issue at all. And then, sort of like Seth was saying, they'll just make some crap up, like to get press. So
he is so desperate to win. And I use the word desperate and I don't mean it in like a negative sense, but like, he wants to make that achievement because he wants to be the greatest because everyone is telling him that he needed to be that since he was 13, 14 years old. And so him not living up to those expectations of other people is, in my opinion, getting in the way. And I hope that doesn't get in the way of his like mental health because other people shouldn't dictate who you are. I mean, we have just like you said, glazed over him and everything he has done off the court right? Like, you've been such an amazing person. It has been so much fun to watch you play. I have been rooting against you for so long when Kobe and you, I wanted to see you guys in championship and Kobe beat you. Like, these are the things that, like, but I respect everything that he has done, on the court. And I really, really admire the things he has done off the court. So I hope that doesn't get in the way. And I feel like, as Seth had alluded to, that it is because of the off court things that the media has given him, this sort of pressure that is undeserved. I mean, essentially, he's been a basketball player. He's 40 years old now, his entire life. So for essentially 35 years, since he was able to pick up a basketball and be in a league, and for at least, I'd say, 25 of those years. How long has he been in the NBA? 20 years? No, longer than that, 22 years. So we're looking at, since he was 13, right? Like, the world has been telling him he had to do these things. He didn't even know how to wipe his own butt by then, and they were telling him he had to be the greatest of all time. Like, the guy has had enormous pressure, and he has risen to all of it. And somehow people still are criticizing him. We need to just sit back and enjoy the game at this point. Like, the guy has given us 20 plus years of his life, to us just enjoying his success. And I'm really appreciating it, especially with the passing of Kobe Bryant. And, that was my childhood. Kobe Bryant was my childhood. So, like, watching him play, like, I didn't even remember an NBA before him, like, that's how, like, tuned in I was to him. So, like, with LeBron, he's been in. Some of these kids who are in the NBA now do not know what an NBA is without him. And so it's like, let's just enjoy the show. And I think people just need to let off the gas a little bit. He's a 40-year-old man who's had success on and off the court. Let's just praise him for that. Whether he's in the conversation of MJ. I'm not in the conversation of nobody for nothing. So I think, the fact that, that we can put him in that same conversation is an achievement itself. I think he needs to embrace that a little bit more, like, hey, like, cause we're never going to really know. You never were going to face MJ. MJ is never going to face you. Right. Like, but it's a fun thing that we can talk about as fans. But as far as a player, man, you got to let it go. Just let it go. You're never going to, he called it chasing the ghost in Chicago. You're never going to get him. You just never will.
And you're going to like this, Frank. 23 years. Good old 23 years. LeBron James.
There we go. Well, and just been throwing these things out there more and more. I'm wearing one of his jerseys right now, and this is a jersey that my brother had owned, and kind of like I've been talking about, a lot of this podcast is honoring my brother's memory. And
hold on, stand back from the camera. So it's the fit, bro. Show us the fit.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go, baby.
So yes, this is my brother's. And I just remember my house in the sticks in Southern Oregon, my brother ushering me into our corner room and saying, "Brother, this may be the next MJ." And he showed me highlights, because I think Zach must have been, because they're around the same age, 17 or 18, I believe.
LeBron is 1 year older than us.
Yeah. So he just told me, this guy might be next. He might be next. So I have that personal connection there. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I just think it's really the other thing I was kind of noting. You guys can riff on this, or we can go on to the next question. But I was just sort of thinking about how many careers LeBron has made, right? Like, essentially, if you're a hater, if you follow him everywhere he goes and you're a reporter, right? Like, he brought so many people money. I mean, MJ does, and a lot of athletes do. I'm not saying that athletes in general don't do this, but it feels like LeBron in particular, like, man, he made a lot of people a lot of money, no matter how you felt about him. If you were ice cold or you're, flaming hot, like, saying something about him brought you press, brought you attention, brought you money, right?
Yeah.
And I just think that that's an important thing to note. And again, just the we can nitpick, and again, as fans and then analysts and all that, we can nitpick the game, and that's, the beauty of basketball, the beauty of any sport, right? We can go on and on. Oh, we shouldn't have passed up that shot. Oh, what the game 7 block. Oh my gosh, any of those things, right? And just relish in them. But the ways in which some of the commentary has gone where it will veer into LeBron's character, like, in other words, when he's on the court and he passes up a shot, oh, it's because and then they'll kind of more or less hint at him not being macho enough or him not being whatever enough. That's sort of why I wanted to illustrate that personality difference, because I think they just approach the game differently. And we can literally argue what we find to be better. But when we try to claim that one is more masculine than the other, I'm just not having it. So that's my little soapbox.
Yeah,
But
I think it's two different forms of masculinity, right?
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant wanted the ball because Kobe Bryant felt that his best chance of winning was the ball in his hands. LeBron James wants the best chance of winning, regardless if the ball was in his hands. So hence, Ray Allen hitting the shot in the corner, which, by the way, statistically, and I always tell everybody this, statistically, Ray Allen is the most clutch player in NBA history. When the ball's in his hands with 5 seconds or less, you have a 63% chance of making the last shot.
Wait, that's more than, say, like Steve Kerr and Robert Horry?
Yeah, because Ray Allen is either going to make the correct pass. So they take that all into consideration. So they take the passing, the shots, everything, even clutch defense, making the right defensive play. Ray Allen was like 63%. So it was nuts. He was head and shoulders above everybody that you would have thought would have been up there. Like, the LeBron Jameses, the Michael Jordans and things like that. I think Michael Jordan was only at like 30 something percent, when you take that all into consideration. Now, granted, he hit the shots on the biggest stage, so I think when the stage was higher, he elevated his game too. So, yeah.
Well, and to that point, again, people are going to listen and be like, oh, that white guy's just really, really glazing LeBron. But he is more clutch. He is more clutch than people give him credit for.
He is.
He may not be as clutch as MJ per se, right? Who's like the king of clutch, right? But like any of the naysaying of him not being clutch, I'm like, your eye test would prove that wrong. The analytics would prove that wrong. Just enough with that. All right. But this is not a basketball podcast. This is a masculinity podcast.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. So yeah, kind of the next question. We've already sort of hinted at one, which is sort of, well, actually, yeah, maybe we'll do this one really briefly, but just as influence, specifically with men, right? Probably similar to the other basketball player we reviewed on here. I have a feeling we're all going to say variations of a lot of influence. But yeah, just curious for you guys to riff on that a little bit. What you think is influence on the game and in general. And yeah, what is it? Is it growing? Is it stagnating? It's plateaued? What do we think?
No, I think his influence is actually growing and has made a very good, a big impact, right? Like before LeBron James, like we saw this sort of fluidity of basketball, but with LeBron James, we have seen true positionless basketball. Like we used to label people 1 through 5s, and very rarely do you see that now, right? Like you'll see somebody go up at the post. You'll see somebody, somebody who should be a center handling the ball like Nikola Jokic, who is also shooting the three. He's leading the league in points, assists, and rebounds this year. I mean, like the guy's doing everything. As far as because it's a masculinity podcast about his impact with men across the board, like outside of basketball, I think has also very much helped. You can now see men, especially men of his hue, can see somebody who also grew up without a dad and see now a blueprint, right? Like I think, and hey, I might get chastised for this, but I think what LeBron has done for inner city men is kind of what Barack Obama has done for, educated people in situations, right? Like before Barack Obama, I never thought that I'd even see a black president. The fact that I was able to see one kind of was like, oh wait, like America is moving in the right direction. These things are achievable, right? Seeing LeBron James take care of his sons, um, take care of his wife, his family and entire family, take care of his mother, build an empire, and also not have a lot of negative like relationships, and mentoring people around him is like giving these kids, like, I think a different sense of what it should be. Like, I love Michael Jordan, I love Kobe Bryant, but those weren't sort of the things that you saw while they played, right? Like Kobe Bryant towards the end of his career was, mentoring people like Booker, right? Like, and Tatum. Like you saw him do these things towards the end of his career, but like he was all cutthroat the whole time. Like, yo, job ain't done or job ain't finished, right? Like that was him. That was his mantra. People were asking, like, hey, how do you feel about this win? I don't feel nothing. I haven't won a championship. LeBron is completely different, right? Like now you see Steph Curry with his girls and all that, like things have changed. And I really love this part of it. About this part of basketball. I really enjoy the things that LeBron has brought to basketball or even to media that is intangible. You had touched about this a little bit, Caleb, but you were saying like he made a lot of people rich, whether you loved him or hate him. Like he made a lot of people rich. And the only ones that can hate him are the ones who hated him on the court. You couldn't hate him off the court. He was a good guy. And so like, I think these are things that I think we should be able to move forward with. I don't see a lot of unhealthy things that he has done outside of, like maybe try, because I see this with Giannis Antetokounmpo as well, like trying to manipulate the front office, and you have destroyed a team. But I wouldn't say that as like an unhealthy characteristic, right? Like it was just unhealthy to the game of basketball, like to your career, but you're not hurting anyone, in my opinion, like, like socially. But LeBron, considering the archetypes that he had to grow up with, considering the stereotypes that he had to contend with, he is a black man who dribbles a basketball. And we saw that on the news when someone told him to shut up and dribble. He continued to use his voice and play the game of basketball at the best of his ability. This is a person who has never turned his back on his people or just anyone, even though anything that came out of his mouth was being scrutinized. And that's just the society we live in. And he has rose above that on every occasion. And I think that is something that we need to commend, because between him and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, like I think they have been very vocal about, helping with society issues.
Yeah, there's not too much I can actually add to that one. I like the fact that, Frank touched on a lot of good points. My biggest takeaway talking to young players, and I'll give an example, but is LeBron James has always been honest, whether that was the right decision or wrong decision. He's always been honest. And, that honesty carries on to players who now watch him. And he doesn't fit the rigid confines or the construct of what masculinity is, to be stoic, to be emotionless. He's not those things. He wants to show you his emotion, and he wants to be expressive. Now, again, whether the times that he did it or right or wrong, those are things that he has to deal with. And just like anybody, I think as we age, we can look back at things that decisions that we made and say, I could have made a better decision. Absolutely. And I think LeBron James is almost there in his life, right? And one of the things that I give an example to, about how early on I knew LeBron James was a different type of masculinity. So most individuals, especially at 18 years old, most men, right, would have made the dumb decision of, so LeBron James had a high school sweetheart, and most of these guys would have made the dumb decision on going on road trips and sleeping with whoever they wanted, and then getting caught up with, all that drama that ensues with that. LeBron James, I'm not saying that he did all that. What he did was he and his high school sweetheart, had an agreement. Hey, you're going to go to college. You're going to do your thing. I'm going to be in the NBA. I'm going to do my thing. Yes, we'll stay in contact. But when everything's done and we're more mature and we could approach this in a more mature manner, let's come back to it. obviously now that's his wife, right? And it was early on where I said, hey, he could have made the wrong decision, either by saying, I don't want to deal with you anymore. And that could have been obviously the love of his life. Or, he could have made the wrong decision by keeping her around and then falling into temptation as a young 18 to 22, 23-year-old.
Or not
But
even
he made the
allowing her to
decision.
grow. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, that's exactly it. And there's decisions that he made at a young age where I said, wow, that is very mature and that is very masculine. Right. And I pass that on to now my players, where I'm like, when they're in their relationships, don't play with anybody's emotions. Be honest with yourself. And that's the best thing you could do. And if they don't like the decision, I could guarantee 3-4 years from now, they're going to turn back and look back at it and say, you know what? At least you told me the truth. I can respect you for it. If there's any opportunity for a relationship, post that, that's going to be it, is if you were absolutely honest with this individual. And when I saw LeBron James do that at a young age, and now looking back at it as an older man, I say, that right there could probably encompass a lot of examples of what masculinity should be, you know. And obviously Frank touched on all the other parts too.
Well, and I think you both are kind of speaking to what our next question would be here, which is more or less simply put, like, how does his masculinity intersect with the relationships in his life? So you just described things with his wife Savannah. We've touched a little bit about his kids, but something else that you guys had kind of mentioned on and off is, more or less his teammates tend to have really good things to say about him, right? Um, Again, with the LeGM stuff, Seth, you had mentioned before about, okay, if he's around, he's taking more money that I could be making. All those things are a reality, right? And, at times his frustration and angst with not having good teams and those players on those teams maybe feeling a kind of way about that, right? That'd be fair. But again, all of those things are on the court, right? And he probably to some degree would critique any of his teammates about stuff that they're doing on the court. In fact, now I'm thinking of the famous meme of him with J.R. Smith. What was that, 17 or 18? When JR didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And, LeBron was none too thrilled about that. But overall, right, like, that's the extent of how mad he'll get, right? As opposed to, punching a teammate, right? Like someone else that we've talked about. Now, again, this is still a masculinity pod, but one more basketball point. We could wonder about the way in which, that edge or that intensity that MJ had, Kobe had as well, right? If to some degree, maybe, the psychology of it all, does that inspire teammates to rise to that, right? Versus LeBron being more of a team first player, being more of a, let's all do this together by committee. That's something we can always wonder about. But I just think that this is sort of a random example, but even in the Mind the Game podcast, it always felt like moving on from season 1, right? Where he's like, I need a new coach. Can I podcast with you? Oh, yeah, you're my coach now. Woo. um, what I think is kind of cool, at least about, the seasons moving forward, is, he saw that someone like a Steve Nash was kind of getting a little disrespected, was kind of not really getting the, attention that he needed, right? Frank, you mentioned before about the positionlessness of the NBA. And, there's something to be said about the way that Nash influenced the NBA. And it almost felt like LeBron was like, I want you to be brought on this pod. I want to have conversations with you because basketball I have such passion about. And I know how much you did for this game. I know how much you didn't win a ring, but the way in which you played, we are now living into. And so that just to me speaks to, he does a really good job of giving respect and deference, which, again, the other fellow, to his credit, he doesn't like besmirch people, but he definitely is sort of like, I'm better than you all.
Yeah.
I mean, we love it. We love that about MJ. Let's be real. We kind of love that. So I'm not even necessarily knocking that. But, yeah.
Yeah, the Nash one is actually a beautiful comparison about what masculinity is. He's not afraid to give somebody else his flowers. Like, I've been using Nash as an example for 10 years now to my point guards. A lot of point guards, they want to score. And I'm like, and here's this guy, 50, 40, 90 is the number, 50% from field goal, 40% from three, 90% from free throw, right? I was like, and he's still averaging 10 assists a game, right? What made him so deadly was those 10 assists a game. And I'm glad that LeBron James touched on it. And now a lot of coaches are going to coach it too. So it kind of gives me less of an advantage. But the Nash dribble, I used to teach that all the time when I was at Azusa Pacific. For example, one of our former starting guards, and then he went to backup, and I was working with him. Shout out to Terrence. And I told him, he got to a certain point and he would either try to put up a jump shot or he'd jump stop and try to pass it out. I'm like, no, dribble. Make that dribble, wait for the defense to open up. If they respect you, right, they're going to stay away. You're going to have a layup eventually. If they don't, you're going to have that pass and you're going to have an open three. And, he became our most productive player coming off the bench, or sixth man, essentially, jumps in this stuff. And back to LeBron James, he's not afraid to do that. He's not afraid to give people opportunities in which they could flourish in. And again, I think that's part of masculinity. Masculinity is ensuring that the people around you feel safe, right? And when I say safe, that's not just, I'm buff and I could fight, 6 bears, like it's also making sure that somebody feels safe confiding in you. It also ensures that somebody feels safe in expressing themselves around you, right? That's part of masculinity. And I think LeBron James has expressed that in spades, thus far in his life.
Yeah, I think when you talk about, well, just in general, so like I think LeBron James, like you said, like has this sort of duality. Like we don't ever see him as somebody who isn't masculine, right? Like this is a guy who, you know, at 41 years old, looks great for his age. He's very pro like self-care, like men's self-care, right? Like where that hasn't been like the case before. But he's very much that. He's very vocal about men seeking mental health, like but we see him as this phenomenal athlete who may go down as one of the greatest athletes of all time, right? Like we're not just talking basketball. Like this guy is actually that good. When we're talking about his um relationships and his communal ties, he had the oh it's the LeBron James Foundation. I can't remember what it's exactly called. It might be called the LeBron James Foundation. But then he also created that school, the I Promise school, like in his community, that was trying to help kids, get educated and go to college. And, he's always given back to his community and um, has even been criticized for those things, but to me, like he is, he is, he is a different person. He has walked differently than athletes that we have seen before him. He does give back to his community. He does give back to his friends and family. He does push, like I guess grooming norms when it comes to men, right? Like understanding your bodies, understanding how to eat. The guy's 41 years old. I'm a year younger than him, and I couldn't run a mile. Like the guy is like he's doing great. He's doing things that no one else has done on and off the court. I think to answer your question more directly, Caleb, his relationships show that we see these relationships and they're blossoming. We don't see crumbling relationships around him. They all blossom. And everyone who's around him has always had positive things to say about him or have become more successful because of him, right? Like he tries to legitimately help. And I think that touches on to what Seth was saying. Like, in order to be a protector, you have to make sure that people can confide in you and be vulnerable with you, and part of that you can see that these people are safe with him, right? Like they're making business moves with him. I'm sure some of these people put their entire paychecks or life savings in, like, okay, LeBron, because you said it, I'm going to do it, and it's paid off for them. Like there are a lot of things that are going for him. Like I he has achieved everything I think he could on and off the court. And I think as I said before, that we need to appreciate that. He'll always be compared to Michael Jordan, but that is good company, because I don't know anyone else is going to be compared to the two of you. Wembanyama might be close, but he is just a freak of nature, right? 7 foot tall, can shoot, can dribble. He takes 3 steps from one free throw line to the next free throw line is already dunking. Like, the guy is just a freak of nature. Like, you can't help it. But to be in that conversation as GOAT for anything really is incredible. And I think on and off the court, he's probably the GOAT.
Yeah, and I think too, just again, his relationships with other people, but specifically other players. I'm gonna riff on this and then end up answering our last question, which is, how has his work or his athletics in this scenario impacted our own masculinity, our own conception of things? Just thinking of 2016, Game 7. I'm just thinking about, in some ways, we could say that, MJ or Kobe or any of these other guys have clutch gene. One of my favorites, Damian Lillard, Dame time. That will take that last shot, right? That, are willing and want to do that, right? And that does take stones. That is really, really a tall task. But in the same vein, to be in this GOAT conversation and to be in Game 7 and to have just done an incredible athletic endeavor of, going from one end of the court and blocking Iggy's shot, and then whether it was the next player or the play after, literally deferring. You know what, Kyrie? I like you on the block. I like whatever shot you're going to get up. I trust that you're going to be able to help us win. And then, goes down as one of the best, probably the best finals game of all time. And I just think that that's just a testament to, obviously they had their weird cryptic stuff. Man, we got to do Kyrie probably at some point. He's an interesting fellow. But regardless, right? Like, there was, their tension, whether we want to say it was just Kyrie being like, oh man, I'm not the biggest kid on the block. Oh man, probably there was something to do with that and why he eventually left and all that kind of stuff. But then, we fast forward to now, and clearly they, almost tweeting. It almost seems like they tweet at each other like bromance, like, oh man, those were the days. Like, I wish that we could come back. I wish he could be, traded back to me. And again, that just goes to this guy. He fosters those really good relationships. And so again, tying to our own masculinity. So I shared in the MJ episode, I remember where I was when I was a wee little guy, and MJ hits that jumper, Game 6, and I remember exactly where my brother was. That bought this jersey later on, and us just being so excited, right? Fast forward 18 years, me and my brother were in my my parents' condo in Portland, and we're watching Game 7, and that's just a memory. Oof. Okay, here's some emotion. That's just a memory that I'm going to cherish forever. Now, we just wanted the Cavs to win so bad. And to have that moment with, my brother who's gone and who was a huge LeBron fan, right? I kind of like waffled back and forth, but I kind of saw it in those finals. I kind of saw it when I was spending time with Zach and what he saw in LeBron, right? In that block, in that deferring to, you know what, Kyrie, you got the shot. I trust you that you're gonna make a good play. I haven't talked about it too much, but when I had my time in athletics, I was a bit too sensitive. I was a hard on sleep kind of guy, and I had a rough go of it. And then when I got into my 20s, I picked it up, at a pickup level. So it wasn't like too sweaty or too intense or anything like that. But, I found my way and I really started to enjoy it. And I just remember the players that I enjoyed playing with the most. They could see that, like, oh, that white guy, like most white guys, he's got a decent jump shot. Let's just park him in the corner and I'll draw the team and I'll kick out. And that guy, he can hit at a pretty
Give him
good
the
clip.
ball 3-point line.
So, yeah, that's right. That's right. I got it. But anyway, just the, I need players like that can see that, there are some guys that are not going to be as talented, as athletic, as gifted, as whatever, right? But they can see a particular skill that you have, and they want you to have a moment to shine. And I see that in LeBron, right? He'll take his own moments to shine, which I also appreciate, right? He's taken a lot of clutch shots. It's not that he's not, but he's able to do both. And I think that, to me, I find that to be aspirational. I think that's a really, really good quality. Obviously, in this case, on the court, but then also off the court, right? With all of his friendships, all of his connections with his family. Again, just he likes his committee. He likes these people around him, and he treats them well. And I want to do the same. So,
You touched on. Go ahead, Seth.
No, Frank, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you touched on this just a little bit, like with your brother and watching Game 6. I will tell you some of the hardest times I ever have is like during the playoffs because we always used to talk mess to each other. So it was always like, he would always try to push LeBron on me, especially when Kobe was playing. And I was like, will you stop it? Stop it. It's such an annoying, text. And I knew it was coming every time LeBron made it further in the playoffs than Kobe did. I knew it was coming. And every time it got me, it was like, I was so mad at him.
And then, no, that's good. You mentioned LeBron James and how it's affected us. Now, another funny story. You talked about that 2016 NBA Finals. So LeBron James was down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors, and I remember then I was also still coaching high school at the time. So I was coaching girls basketball at Ayala High School, and the girls all loved Steph Curry. Like that was the golden boy at that time, And I was the only one like LeBron James will come back. If anybody come back from 3-1, it's LeBron James. And I remember we made a deal, and it was whether or not I would do suicides or I get to take a picture of my choice, right, of the team. And so the picture that I chose was all of them, and I have it actually on my background on my computer. It was all of them at half court, and they do the LeBron bomb. So when LeBron won, of course, I had him do that. And it's actually a really cool picture, the whole team, and I posted it on my personal Instagram and stuff like that, but it brought up some good memories. With that, how does his work life affected, my own personal masculinity? I could give certain examples of what that looks like, but I think it would be better suited to allow whoever is listening to understand what LeBron James means in masculinity, right? So when LeBron James comforts his teammates, when he doesn't allow his teammates to be down for too long, when his teammates leave, there's not an active beef, there's not an active, anger towards these, teammates, so at least the vast majority of teammates. And it's funny, the teammates that end up having a problem with LeBron James, you find out years later that it was their fault, right? That they were the ones that initiated the controversy or the animosity. And I'm in the profession where I'm able to do those things. And I'm lucky enough to have LeBron James still in the NBA. And a lot of my players never experienced an NBA without LeBron James, right? So when they see LeBron James, and I can give that as an example to them, LeBron James is the greatest player of all time, right? When I say, hey, you shouldn't be talking to your teammate like that. And I could give an example for LeBron James, or I could literally clip an example of LeBron James, where he's talking to a teammate, passionately, but he's not talking down to somebody. He's not calling them an idiot or, whatever it is. And I have plays.
Isn't there that meme where he's like doing like
I think it was more like, yeah. But him and JR are really cool. You know what I'm saying? And JR has been on podcasts where it was like, yeah, that was stupid. And so I always say when something's incredibly stupid, I think sometimes, you gotta call it out.
I get it passed.
Yeah. But when somebody just makes a wrong decision, LeBron James is not there saying, hey, man, you're an idiot. And one of the things that happened, this was the first season that I've ever had where I missed the national tournament in college. And it was by far, and I'm not saying anything, by far the worst season that I've ever had in coaching college basketball, and it was full of men. We inherited a team mostly, and it was full of men that had large egos, and we had to snip that. We had to get rid of it. And what I found is outside of timeouts, we draw a play, and a guy would tell his teammates, "Hey, man, that's just going up. It's going up. I'm not passing it." And we would see it on film. We would see the play execute correctly, and there's Caleb in the corner wide open, and they don't pass Caleb the ball. And we're saying, okay, why didn't you pass Caleb the ball? Oh, I thought I had a good shot. And so then I would point to LeBron James. LeBron James did not care who won. In fact, he jumped on a fan who hit a half court shot. Right? He was excited for a fan that had nothing to do with the game. I was like, you need to be excited for your teammates, who have that success, because the success is going to come back around. LeBron James is not even arguably easily the most decorated basketball player of all time. And he still jumps up and down and gets excited for his teammates' successes. And that was the overall message. And, how does it affect me? How does it affect my career? I could point to LeBron James and say, hey, look, this is how we need to be. This is how we need to act. And lo and behold, the last 10 games of our season, we win 60% of our games. And we knock out the defending champs in our conference tournament, right? So there are things to be said about that when teams are able to gel together and feel safe with one another. And that locker room, when we lost at the end of the year, right? There are guys crying in the locker room. I'm not, afraid to say those kinds of things, because that's okay. They poured out the emotion. They figured out the lessons towards the end of the season. And they were like, man, this is how it's supposed to be. And now that the season was done, right, there are tears. There are guys giving each other's hugs. There are guys, that are going to be graduating now that have made lifelong friends. And those are the things that I like to see as a basketball coach. And again, I could point that to LeBron James.
On a basketball note, because I see with like LeBron James, like even Kobe and Shaq in their retirement, and then we see LeBron James and Kyrie now kind of having like that little like bro perspective. I'm really hoping that we approach that. And with this, I feel like change of masculinity, right? Like you touched on it, like LeBron getting excited for teammates. Hopefully, like we can finally see like it's going to make basketball better. A lot of these old heads, and I'm part of the problem too, because I love the Kobe Bryant mentality and I love the Michael Jordan mentality. Like I just want to kill you, but like we got to also appreciate like the new like form of masculinity that's coming in, where like these guys are like, no, I'm really happy for him. Like, I don't have to be the number one option the whole time. Right. Like, that's cool. Like, we're winning games. And I want to see that because I want to see somebody win 4 in a row, 5 in a row. They had a career, 8 championships together or something, like something super like it's never been done before because egos didn't get in the way. Like, I'm really hoping for that. Then we can truly be like, who was the best duo? It was probably these guys who didn't let their egos get in the way.
And also, to interrupt just a little bit to Frank's point, not just the players, coaches as well. I see it in my profession a lot. And Frank knows who I'm talking about, he who shall not be named. Um, there are coaches who would literally curse at players on the court and demean them and curse at other coaches. And I had a coach that's on film literally run up into the student section and cuss them all out, right? After a game winning shot, and because the moment couldn't be bigger than that coach, you know, um, and that is such a toxic trait to have. And so not only just with the players, I want to see that with the coaches and everybody who's surrounding in athletics, and I want to see that kind of stuff spread.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Frank, I want to hear you though. Answer the part about how you know LeBron's career and stuff affected you.
Second to Kobe, I think he's been the most impactful player in my like, um, I guess basketball ish. I don't know how you would say it, like the second most impactful player to me, right? Like obviously Michael Jordan was Michael Jordan, but like at a young age, I knew I was watching greatness, but I always wanted to emulate Kobe, which was weird, right? Like maybe because I'm a Lakers fan, but it's like I never wanted to emulate Michael Jordan. I wanted to be Kobe, or I wanted to be Shaq, and then I see LeBron James and I'm like, I hope my kid's like LeBron James.
Absolutely. One last note, and I think I'm channeling my brother by saying this, but through our conversation and just exploring LeBron now and MJ from before, I think why basketball is my favorite and why I think it was my brother's favorite is one guy can carry a game, right? And we've seen that happen, right? Where one guy just goes ballistic, goes nuts, and, in some ways wills a team toward a win, right? But you don't win a championship with one guy. And I think that that's the thing that I really enjoy about basketball is individual games. You might see, one player just go off and completely take over. But at the same time, it is similar to all other team sports in that it is done by committee. It is done by playing in a collaborative way, looking for everyone else to have their wins, to have their shots, to have their moment in the sun. And yeah, I think LeBron emulates that really, really well. But yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah. Is there anything else before we wrap up and call it a day over King James?
Nothing was beautifully said. Yeah.
Awesome, fan. Well, I hope that y'all got something out of it. The playoffs are underway. This will be released right around playoffs.
Final
Trying
Four
to be
today.
strategical. Yeah, Final Four today.
It's
It's
funny.
just the season of good basketball right now. But
I
yeah,
almost
go for it.
did this in Indianapolis. I was going to be at the Final Four this year, and then with the newborn and stuff like that, just couldn't really manage it. So
Yeah, I'm right behind you. Give it a couple months. So
yeah.
All right, fam. Well, good talking. I love these conversations as always. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
You
All
got it,
love,
man.
baby.
Peace. Hey, y'all. Caleb here. Thank you for listening to our show today. Please like and subscribe wherever the heck you listen to pods. And make sure to follow us on all the socials at Influ-Men-Sirs. That is INFLU-men-Sirs. We'll see you next time. Peace.